Okay, Chip. So can you tell me a little bit about your recent Banned Books Week event and how did that go?
Well, the event went very well. We called it the Banned Book Tasting, which it's not an uncommon event for libraries to have. We were the only library in the system to have an active event. There were several other what would be called passive events, which passive is a strange word for it, but it means that people come in, can take a look, whatever they like. But this one went very well. It had a lot of community support. Essentially, a banned book tasting is much like a wine tasting, where you would have the various types of wines, except this would be a lot of the books that have been banned throughout history. And what's interesting about the event is when people come in and they're sort of surprised. Like, how, this book was banned? I read this in high school, or this book was banned. My grandmother read this to me, or something like that. And one of the best things about it was when some of the younger people, some of the high school students, would sit down and read a book that most people would consider innocuous, but literature, and just sat there reading for an hour. So it went very well.
So the students from Hightstown, they do come here fairly often?
Some of them. I mean, we have a lot of people from every age range, but the event seemed to bring out a lot of people, and I was very pleased to see younger people there, because a lot of older people do come out because they're opposed to banning books and things like that. So I was glad to see that the next generation was into intellectual freedom too, which of course I assumed they would be.
So are banned books different in public libraries versus school libraries? Are there different lists?
Well, the issue of banned books is sometimes a misnomer, because first, a book is challenged. So when we say like Banned Books Week, it should be more banned and challenged books. So a book will go through a challenge process. Someone will say, I object to having this book in a library. And the list is not different, but essentially the book challenges and banning filter up from the school libraries. So they're the same books. In this case, all of the major books have to do with LGBTQ plus issues and issues about underrepresented members of society. So there is sort of a thematic element to the books that are banned, specifically the books that have been challenged and banned over the last year, specifically.
All right, you know what? I'm actually gonna just really quickly. Oh, sorry about that. I realized that you were in 1/3 of the frame and looking over there, so that's all well and good.
Okay.
So why, to you, is it so important to promote banned books?
Well, to me, it's about intellectual freedom. So it is about the right to read. And so having access to books for everyone shouldn't be subject to one person or one group's view of how the world should be. So for instance, if you don't want your child to read a book, that's absolutely up to you. But you don't have a right to tell me to not have my child read the book. I should note that I don't have any children as of yet. But the whole point is, one of the major decisions of my childhood was when my parents decided whether or not I could get an adult library card at the age of 12, because where I lived, you could only get a juvenile card. And, I came from a conservative household, so it was a lot. So I understand, where many of the critiques are coming from. But my parents opted in favor of intellectual freedom.
Well, that's great. Not as common now. What elements of a book tend to make it a target for banning?
Well, sadly, these days, it's anything that's not what would be called, heteronormative. So anything that goes against the grain of what someone might consider, orthodox sexuality, or something to do with the dominant culture, which is still primarily Caucasian. So those themes, unfortunately, are the main themes in the last few years. Anything else, anything that someone may not want, specifically their children are exposed to, mention of sexuality, which happens a lot, obviously, in coming-of-age books, because, there's reality, and reality is written about in books, and different people, want their children or, to be exposed to reality at different times.
So are there any banned books that you'd like to highlight?
Well, I wanted to highlight a few which a lot of people wouldn't suspect would be banned at certain places and have been banned in the past in various places in the United States. In the past year there have been about 3,600 book challenges and about 1,200, a little over 1,200 actual bannings in schools, which is actually quite a bit. So one that most people probably wouldn't suspect that was banned was the Diary of Anne Frank. Very obviously very powerful book. Most people have read it. But in a portion of the book, she's a young woman coming of age. She talks about sexuality, and that triggered a book challenge and a book ban. Okay, which obviously misses the main point of the whole book. But it deals with, and it's an important part, but it's not the thrust of what most people associate with the book. Another one is Harry Potter. And Harry Potter was banned because it included sorcery and was considered anti-religious or anti the dominant religion. And that also surprises a lot of people because most people see it as a nice fantasy book, kind of fun adventure and things like that. Probably the one that surprised me most of all the lists I've read, and this is Where's Waldo Now, but Where's Waldo, the original Where's Waldo. And, we're still trying to figure out where Waldo is. But, typically, like you can see, people familiar with Where's Waldo, there's these, the book is try to find Waldo in this entire, bunch of people. And the reason it was challenged and banned was because there was a beach scene with 1 million people, and there was a woman who was sunbathing topless, but she was laying on her front, so you could just see her back. So it was there was nothing salacious or anything like that. And when they reprinted the book, so if you go to the original edition, you can see just the regular, what it was. When they came out with the next edition, they put, a string bikini on her in the back, so it didn't need to be banned.
It makes you wonder how they even found that.
Right. It's sort of like you wonder if some people are going looking for it, or if somebody mentions it to them, and you also wonder, of all the challenged and books that get banned, how many of them have actually been read by the people who are challenging them and wanting to get them banned? And it turns out not many have been read. Even when Salman Rushdie wrote the Satanic Verses and had the fatwa put on him, the book had not been read by the people who had put the fatwa on him. So many times these books are not read. It's sort of word of mouth, and then there's a firestorm of criticism.
I imagine with 1,200 books on the ban list, they don't have time to read all of that, because I have heard that it's actually a very small group of people who ends up dictating this. Yeah,
it's a very small group backed by large corporate conservative interests, a couple of major groups that have a lot of money, and also fund these parental groups, and they have names sort of like Mothers for Freedom and a lot of patriotic names, and so unless you dig a little bit, it sounds very innocuous. until you actually see what is going on, which is essentially, I want to impose thought control on people who would like to check out library books and read.
All right. So, from your view, what do these book bannings actually accomplish?
I think the book bannings actually accomplish just dividing people. I think they also accomplish a rise in sales of the banned books, which is sort of an irony of it, because every time a book gets banned, it goes up in sales. I mean, they start selling like wildfire. I think for the people who achieve the bans, they see it as a big accomplishment in whatever their moral or political views or agenda might be. But sadly, what it also chips away at is democracy and intellectual freedom and the First Amendment.
So can you tell me a little bit about the threats that 2 librarians received online while promoting the event?
Yeah, and like I said, overwhelmingly, the community supported the event. But there were a number of posts sort of like, do you know have you read this yourself? And it was like one person over and over. I think one that was notable was threatening the entire system and people who supported intellectual freedom with karmic retribution, which, as a friend of mine pointed out, is a misunderstanding of karma. In terms of the 2 librarians, I would put it more as a veiled threat of doxing, because the librarians were pictured promoting the event, and the individual wanted the librarians to be identified. And so obviously, if you want people identified, it's with the intent to do something. And so generally these days that would be doxing. Mm-hmm. Which is, the thing is, librarians now are regularly leaving the field. Many are getting death threats in other parts of the country, getting harassed, and it's things that people who went into librarianship would never have expected.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect it to be a controversial profession.
Right. And the people who get involved with it are just people who love books and want to promote people reading, and to people who want to serve the community. So it's a very strange position to be in, where you have basically a bunch of book lovers now being at the front line of fighting for intellectual freedom. And yet it does seem strangely appropriate that librarians would be the people doing that.
So what can we all do to spread awareness and combat book bannings?
Well, I always say, it starts at home, which is to promote critical thinking, to promote intellectual freedom and open conversations in your own home. It also includes going to school board meetings if books are challenged. At the next level, it includes running for school board, being on a school board, so that the votes against banning books is there. And generally in society, just creating an atmosphere where the mentality of thought control is considered, I don't think that's a good idea to try to control other people's thoughts. So you have your thought, I'll have my thought, and that's fine. And that's a basic, what I believed was a basic American value and protected in the Constitution.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's why I'm here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.